Okay.
Okay, there we are. We are live. Hello to everybody, and welcome to History Matters, and so does coffee. Sometimes to a greater or lesser degree. Today's a greater degree, I would say. Um, Today we're going to talk about national credit, crashing the economy, things like that that might be on your mind for some reason or another. But before we plunge into that, I turn to another partner in crime, Claire, who is going to explain the rules of the game. Annie is away for this week, so she cannot be here. She will be back next week. But Claire has wonderfully, generously offered to stand in.
Yes, well, good morning, everybody. I'm Claire Howard. I'm with NCHE. I'm our communications coordinator, and I'm stepping in for my friend Annie Evans. So here's what's going to happen. So Joanne's going to talk for about 30 minutes. While she's talking, if you two, just the two of you in the audience, if you folks want to chat in the
It's a
chat, that's
small
totally fine.
audience.
But yeah, just a little bit of people. Um, if you want to just keep the conversation going in the chat, that's totally okay. But if you have any questions for us, put them in the Q&A, and then I will read those to Joanne, and we can get the conversation started. And I will be back in about 30 minutes.
Perfect. And if you are here for the first time, please say so in chat, where you will receive a robust welcome from the History Matters community, which has been here for 257 weeks. I don't have the number. I don't know. Oh, Carrie is a first timer. I happen to see as I'm moving my notes in front of me. Welcome, Carrie. Whatever it is, it's 250 something, and I don't know because I'm bad with numbers, because that's why I'm a historian. But at any rate, welcome to those who are new. Um, I don't even need to say anything about what has happened in the last few days about the economy and tariffs. It's been all over the place, no matter to what degree you're tuned in. It's hard to miss the fact that the stock market tanked to a remarkable degree. Um, and that naturally led me, as it would do for one, to Alexander Hamilton. Um, in particular, it led me to one quote. I've been thinking about this quote for days, and I will read it when it comes to the right moment to read the quote. Um, it has to do with what Hamilton thinks about national credit, sort of our financial reputation. I'll come back to that shortly. But at any rate, I thought of Hamilton because Hamilton recognized what perhaps is not thought of very often these days, or perhaps is, and I'm not even going to wander into the territory of thinking about what that suggests. But the point I want to make is that economic measures fundamentally shape a nation, right? And shape not only its economy, but shape potentially its infrastructure, its unity, its reputation overseas, the strengths of its national institutions, the spirit of a people. You could go on and on and on and on. The degree to which potentially, not all economic measures do this, but the degree to which economic measures can really fundamentally shape a nation. And that's where Hamilton's thinking came from that idea. That he always, from when he's a little tyke in the army marching around, he's already thinking about the economy and sending letters to important people saying, our economy is bad. Here's what we need to do. So he was always financially minded that way. That's just who he was. But he really understood early off and throughout his time as Secretary of the Treasury under our first president, George Washington, he kept trying in a variety of different ways to use economic measures to shape the country, to bring it together, to bring the states together, to reinforce the national government, to have people respect the national government, to have foreign nations respect the new nation. That's what he was about. Now, this wasn't an easy job to do in those years because the one thing you have to say, you may not agree with his measures, you may not agree with what he was doing, you may not agree with the kind of strong government he wanted at the center of everything. But he took office, right when the United States under the Constitution is starting, and there was no real national coordination of economic anything. So, for example, customs collectors at ports around the country, there was no like national record of how they worked, how much money they brought in. There was nothing, right? So one of the interesting things when you study Hamilton in these early months, let's say, or maybe the first year when he takes office as Secretary of the Treasury, he's trying to just figure out like the map, right? So he creates kind of a questionnaire for customs collectors, like, basically tick the box. I need to know these things about your port, about customs. Just let me know. I'm going to take all this in. I'm going to figure it all out. So the task he's facing, even without his sort of political desire through economic measures, just the task at all is pretty huge, pretty daunting. And, I always say, or maybe not always, I often say when I'm talking about Hamilton, this was in the years before he was a big deal and anybody knew who he was. And I would sometimes get up and there's this guy, you've never heard of him, but he's actually important. His name is Alexander Hamilton. He did a lot of things that are really important in early America, but he did them largely administratively. And administrative geniuses are not sexy. So I was like, you've never heard of him because he wasn't a president and he was being brilliant administratively. Now, of course, he was doing more than that. And that's part of what I want to talk about today is how he understood the link between the nation and its economy and how he tried to use the one to support the other. And as an example of how some of the events that are going on now might do the precise opposite of what Hamilton wanted. Okay, so he when you look at this morning, I went back and reviewed some of his letters from this time period, 1789, 1790, through like, I don't know, I ended up in 1795. I'll come back to that shortly. But at any rate, I reviewed just to remind myself of the tone of what he's writing. And of course, at the center of everything he's doing as Secretary of the Treasury is extreme care, right? Like you don't throw a measure out there without calculating something about it, right? Very careful. And he even sometimes, rhetorically speaking, he would talk very big, but then when it came to actually putting something into practice, he toned it down. He dealt with realities. So he was dealing with big things that could have enormous implications, but he was doing it very carefully, right? And number one. Number two, then his measures were debated by Congress. Imagine that. Congress has the power of the purse. So then there were these big congressional debates about whether people liked his measure or not. I won't go into any detail here, but just to give you a sense. So he had essentially a three-prong plan when he became Secretary of the Treasury of what he was going to do to stabilize the American economy, to organize the American economy, to strengthen the new national government. So number one, and anyone who's seen the musical Hamilton at least knows the phrase assumption of state debts, right? One of the first things he does after sending out questionnaires is I think that the national government should assume responsibility for the state debts run up during the Revolution. The reason for that being the states, people will look for, not the states, but basically people who are owed money will look to the national government to be repaid, and that will strengthen the national government and it will bring the states together. And, you can see all of the ways in which it's a centralizing thing and in his mind, a unifying thing, and a way to pull financial power and I guess reputational power, all kinds of power into the national government. So it's really important to him. At one point, he even says, if I couldn't do this, then I might have even stepped down. It's famous that he says that because Jefferson in later years said, the dumbest thing I ever did in my life was help him pass the assumption of state debts. It's like, Oh, why did I do that? And duped. Actually, I was just teaching this in my undergraduate seminar the other day. He says, I was duped. I was duped. Because once this was set, this big plan for having the national government step in, it had a big impact both on how people thought about the national government and the nation as a whole. So part one is the assumption of state debts. Part two is the creation of a national bank. And again, a national bank, right? A national institution, which he argues, in a report that it's going to be wonderful because it's going to get rich people to invest in the government, and it's going to give the government a forum in which it can move money around, and that's going to be important. And lengthy report. These are all, we have, of course, lengthy reports about all of these things. So if you're curious, you can go to the guess it's Founders Online through the National Archives, at least so far. For a long time, the National Archives has had a database of all of the letters of a good number of the major founders, and you can go there and you can read the reports for yourself. I think I searched for Founders Online and it appears, but I know the brilliant people in chat will be able to come up with what it is. The third part is his report on manufacturers. This gets us closer into what we want to be talking about today. He wants to encourage manufacturing in America. And again, new country, there's some manufacturing, but not a lot. A lot of people really assume it's going to be an agrarian nation. And his report on manufacturers is kind of hilarious because he wants people to approve of what he's saying. So he can't just sort of say, manufacturing is the future. So he has very un-Hamiltonian statements in it, like the idea that the nation should only be agricultural is perhaps believed a bit too strongly. Like he's really trying, right? He's like, and of course, agriculture is important, but we need more than that. That report just is not wonderfully successful, although it is successful in one way that is very related to what we're going to be talking about this morning. So at any rate, there's Hamilton carefully crafting economic measures, deliberately knowing and trying to shape the nation through economic measures, to shape the government through economic measures, and then Congress, imagine this, debating it, the pros and cons. He is very concerned, and the report on manufacturers addresses this some. He is concerned with industry, infant industry in the new nation. He wants to support it in some way or another. And so he talks about bounties and tariffs. He talks about tariffs. And he's not extreme in talking about tariffs, but his idea is that if you tax, and at one point in the report on manufacturers, and I didn't copy this down, darn it, he says something along the lines of, I understand that raising taxes is not a popular thing. Like, thank you, Hamilton. But at any rate, and he recognizes that a tariff is a tax, I'll just say. But his idea is that if you have moderate tariffs on some imported goods, then that will help American industry to get a little boost because people will turn more to American products than imported products. And that's the logic, some of the logic behind it. But underlying all of this, underlying the sort of hardcore structural and national government and national character and all of the ways in which he was trying to deliberately shape the nation, underneath all of it for Hamilton was credit. And I mean that in a bunch of ways. So I assume, certainly to me, when you hear that word, the first thing you think of is finance, right? Like a credit card, or you're using credit to purchase things and then paying it back. Financial credit. It seems like a very straightforward word, but if you think about the many other things that can be wrapped up in that word, or the many other ways in which that word can be interpreted, it becomes really interesting, right? So you could say that your credit is your reputation. Like what kind of credit do you have as a human being, or what kind of credit do you have as a fair partner? So it's bigger than finance. You could also say that credit has to do with reputation, that your credit, maybe even with, and Hamilton makes this direct link, national honor, that the nation's credit, meaning much more than finance, is bound up with national honor. He talks about American credit and the plans, the various plans that he's calculating as Secretary of the Treasury, always talking about credit in that bigger way, that expanded way. So I want to give you a few Hamilton quotes to give you a sense of what he's thinking about. So he leaves as Secretary of the Treasury in 1795, and on his way out, he writes a report after his first three big ones. He then writes another report to push along public credit. Again, his first report on public credit, his second report on public credit, he's public credit guy. So this comes, it's from January of 1795, and it's from I'm reading the title here, Report on a Plan for the Further Support of Public Credit. Okay. He's on his way out and he's still like, I'm going to deal with stabilizing public credit, right? That's what I'm all about. And the new nation, to be a big, strong nation and hold its own in the world, it needs to have public credit in all of the meanings that I just described. So this quote rattles around in my head on an ongoing basis. Anytime there's any kind of a financial anything happening on a national level, I think of this. I think partly because it's zippy, and partly because it makes a really powerful statement. Okay, so Hamilton writes, credit is an entire thing. Every part of it has the nicest sympathy with every other part. Wound one limb, and the whole tree shrinks and decays. The security of each creditor is inseparable from the security of all creditors. It's like credit is an entire thing. Wound one part, and the whole tree shrinks and decays. He's talking about national credit, but again, he's talking about national reputation, national character, national reputation in the world, national reputation with its citizens, actual financial credit, which is going to weigh on all of those things. That's a pretty direct statement of why he thinks credit is really important and why he's trying to deal with how to establish and protect American credit. That's where he comes in with thinking, well, maybe if we have tariffs or bounties of some kind, we can help American manufacturing, and it'll be organized, and it'll be fair-minded, and it will be regulated because Congress will have debated it, and some of it will go into action, maybe some won't, but look at that, it's part of the system, a regulated part of the system. At any rate, he's stating there that credit is an entire thing, and if you slash at part of a country's credit, you slash at a lot of the country's credit, right? If you default in some way on some fundamental promise as a nation, and he says a version of this in this report, why would any nation trust you or want to invest in you? They probably wouldn't. Now, he proposes this plan, and then a month later, a couple days more than a month later, it's not doing well in Congress. It's getting opposition, it's being tinkered with, and I do think in his mind, this was like his last thing to sort of enforce national credit as an entire thing, and it's being tinkered with and it's not being taken seriously. So this is the quote that I've been thinking of this week. He writes it to Rufus King, who's a Federalist from New York and a good friend of Hamilton's, February 1795. And this is Hamilton like at full angsty, over-the-top dramatic clip. Okay. The unnecessary, capricious, and abominable assassination of the national honor, credit, by the rejection of the propositions respecting the unsubscribed debt in the House of Representatives haunts me every step I take and affects me more than I can express. To see the character of the government and the country so sported with, exposed to so indelible a blot, puts my heart to the torture. Am I then more of an American than those who drew their first breath on American ground? Or what is it that thus torments me at a circumstance so calmly viewed by almost everybody else? Am I a fool, a romantic Quixote, or is there a constitutional defect in the American mind? I'm just going to leave that question laying out there. But you can feel, he's like, why? Why are we assassinating his word, national credit, national honor, national reputation? Why are people willing to do this? And in his mind, he's like, I've been trying even before I became Secretary of the Treasury to work on this. And now they're just playing around with it and assassinating national honor, national credit, national reputation. That gives you a sense of how fundamentally important he considered public credit in every sense of the word. And over many years, anytime there's something that's done seemingly deliberately that is obviously going to attack national credit in some way, this quote is the first thing that comes into my mind, right? Unnecessary, capricious, abominable assassination of the national honor torments me. I think about that every time because it puts in very dramatic, probably over dramatic terms, how important it is not to play around with public credit, not to risk the reputation of the country with measures that are not well considered, that are thrown out there, that are not debated, that haven't gone through debate in Congress, never mind a lot of other things, that is irrational and irresponsible, and it does damage. That's what Hamilton felt about national credit. And in one way or another, he says that again and again. This is just a particularly juicy way in which he says, why am I less American than everybody else? Because I actually care about national credit, its honor, its reputation. Why is nobody else thinking about this? Okay. Now, I will say that people who didn't agree with some of his policies, like imposing some tariffs or whatever, they didn't like it because it was going to strengthen the national government, right? So this is the period, 1790s, when you have the Federalists who really want to strengthen the central government and the Jeffersonian Republicans who aren't excited about that and would like the national government to deal with foreign affairs and states to really deal with internal measures. So this falls into that conflict as well. And in addition, the Republicans also consistently feel that the things Hamilton suggests are unconstitutional because they're not in the constitutional. And Hamilton, I talked about this yesterday or Wednesday in my class as well. Hamilton is constantly saying, no, 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 like necessary and proper, that Congress can do things necessary and proper, and necessary is a big word, and you can define it in many ways. And so look at everything the government can do if you sort of have this broad construction of what it can do. And this is part of that ongoing argument as well. At any rate, my larger point here is national credit, as Hamilton said again and again and again and again, national credit as its reputation, national credit in its financial policies were profoundly important in what the nation was, what Americans thought about the nation, and what the rest of the world thought of us. He understood fundamentally, and at the Constitutional Convention, one of his big points is people have passions, they're irrational. We need a government strong enough to channel passions. Whether you agree or disagree with what he says about strengthening the government, the idea that economic measures structure a nation in a big way, they do. And if you're careful and wise, they can strengthen the nation in useful ways. They can bring people together. They can give them confidence in the nation. They can help the nation sort of hold its head high on the world stage. And remember, in the period that he's talking about, the new nation. So really, in every sort of definition of the term, the United States doesn't have a lot of credit at all, right? People don't know if it's going to survive. What is this thing? They're not rolling around in money. There are all kinds of ways in which credit is at a loss in a new nation. But the idea that careful economic measures can strengthen a nation by giving people at home and abroad confidence in the nation, in addition to giving a sort of ground level, stable base upon which people can stand so that they don't feel that the ground is constantly shifting beneath their feet. Hamilton, this is what he was about. This was his big thing. Economic measures shape countries fundamentally, shapes their character, shapes their foundation. And he wanted to shape the nation in that way, right? I mean, he saw himself as a kind of prime minister when he's Secretary of the Treasury. And he was very ambitious to shape as much as he could, which is part of why he was alarming to people like Jefferson and Madison. But regardless, what he was doing and the spirit in which he was doing it is a really important reminder of the impact of doing things like passing massive tariffs without careful debate on the rest of the world, and thereby risking, and I go beyond that, destroying America's reputation on the world stage. And who knows how this is going to play out, but already we're seeing countries like France say, why do we want to trade with you at all? Right? Why? Who who are you? Like, why do you feel somehow that we're not going to respond? Right? So we're going to see, I suspect, in coming days, other nations sort of reiterate Hamilton's basic point, which is if you slash at public credit, if you slash at its honor and its reputation and its reliability as a trading partner, a financial partner, you destroy its credit at home and abroad. So I guess I always sort of have a little lesson. And the lesson this week is don't get lost in the numbers and the word tariff and all of the things that are going to make it sound like in some way or another this is abstract and economic, because it isn't. It's going to affect all of us in one way or another. Hamilton got that. So we need to pay attention to what's happening, and we need to think about the ways in which what's happening now, how that's all going to have a bigger impact. We shouldn't ignore it or assume that it's just something for financial markets. I don't know why there's a little mug of beer emoji. I guess that was supposed to be a mug. Thank you very much. But it looked like beer floating up. There it is again. The fact that you can float emojis and attract my attention, I'm so easily distracted. At any rate, of course, why did I say that? Now everyone. Okay, this is my cue that I need to stop talking so that the slew of emojis will stop on the screen. But that's my point. My point is think about what's happening. Hamilton is pretty clear on the larger implications of it. Okay, I'm moving my notes out of the way and I'm going to show you the mug. Now, for those of you who are new here, every week I have a mug for whatever it is, 275 million episodes that we've done. Every week I have a mug that relates in some way to the theme being discussed. And I don't have 200. Oh, there we go. 262. Thank you, Carolee. The 262nd episode. We're working our way to 275 million, but we haven't gotten there yet. But at any rate, during all of those episodes, I've had a mug. I don't have 262 mugs. I've stretched this sometimes, but I don't actually know if I've used this mug before, and folks, you'll have to tell me, but it's pretty appropriate, weirdly appropriate. I opened my cabinet and thought, in a previous life, I was Alexander.
You haven't used that?
Have I? It's a new mug, right?
I've never seen it.
I don't think I've used it. Oh, I have used it before. See, some of you have. I haven't used it in a really long time. So yeah, a student gave this to me.
Oh,
Right, which is a brilliant gift. So I was so pleased when I saw that in my cupboard because it couldn't be more appropriate. In a previous life, I was Alexander Hamilton. Okay.
I love that. And this is an appropriate use of those emojis. I feel like everybody is just this applause. It's incredible.
I know. It's so hard because you're talking and what you see is like,
Oh, I would never be able to do what you do in the first place, but then to have something floating, I'd be like, how does that relate to what I'm saying?
I know. In the back of my mind, I'm like, well, that's why I was like, a beer mug? A beer stein?
Yeah, I don't know that I was like locked in enough to know how beer could have related to the economic market, but maybe, I mean, alcohol is being tariffed, or they're gonna put it, what is it? it's gonna be like 10% more expensive, I saw. So maybe that's it. So I work for teachers, and this is something that teachers will always say. If you have a question, there's a good chance that other people have it too, and we would probably love at least a handful more questions. And so you can put those in the Q&A, but we can probably get started with what we have now. Ready?
Ready.
Okay, so we can start with Dave, and he says Congress has constitutional power to impose tariffs, and they cede that power to president when there is an emergency. What can Congress do to reclaim their power and take it away from a president when there is no emergency? If there is an emergency, why is Trump golfing today and this weekend in Florida?
So this is a bigger question that I won't be able to answer because it's a big and important question. The bigger question is, why isn't Congress claiming its power? Why is Congress in general just ceding its authority to the president? This is yet another example of something happening, and Congress could, right? If there were Republican members of Congress who wanted to oppose these tariffs and wanted to say something and wanted to talk about constitutionally who has the power to do this and how it should be done, they could, but they haven't, right? And the one of the hard lessons that we're learning right now is that regardless of what it says in the Constitution, you need someone to uphold it, right? Checks and balances, the whole fundamental idea of checks and balances is, think about the checks part, right? The idea is that power is divided and that one branch will check the other, right? That's how it's supposed to work. But if one branch just sits back and doesn't do any checking, you get another branch run amok, right? Like we're in this moment where you're seeing the brilliance of checks and balances because you're seeing what happens when there aren't any. The many ways in which the current times are driving home the importance on some level of enforcement of things. This relates to something I've talked about many times, and I won't go into detail now, but this relates to the idea of norms. And every time I say that, I think of Cheers, norm. But getting past that, this has to do with norms because those aren't, they're not laws. They've just been followed along because they seem fair and just, and everyone agrees it's the way things should be. And then you have someone violate a norm, and you realize, oh, there's no law saying they can't do this. There's no guardrail, like they just violated a norm. We live in a time when all of this kind of potential instability is being deployed and exposed as instability. So that's a longer-winded answer to that question.
Well, so then, like, how do you teach those norms if they aren't being upheld?
Well, like I've talked about, sometimes we don't know their norms until they're violated, right? And
Mhm.
and an example of that, it wasn't, I know I've mentioned this at least once before. Yeah, Deb says laws and norms do not enforce themselves. This is true. But one norm that I noticed when it was being violated, not again, not an important one, but a representative one, was during Trump's first term, when he was getting on to Air Force One, and he didn't turn around and wave at the cameras and us. He just got on a plane. Not supremely important, really, except that norm is kind of a way of the president saying, I see you, America. I'm on your business. I'm here because of you. It's a little brief moment of contact between public servant who was given power by us and us. And when it didn't happen, I suddenly thought, wow, that had more of an impact on me than I thought it would, right? That's a norm that probably, if you'd asked people and said, what happens when presidents get on Air Force One, they might have said, well, they turn around and wave. But I had never thought of that before. So some of these norms are things that have flowed naturally and didn't need to be necessarily codified in some way because they were grounded on fairness or justice or reciprocity in some way. And those things are fine and wonderful things, but if they're not upheld and if not everyone agrees on their terms, then you get into a situation like the present situation, where norms are violated, bigger ones than not waving at the camera when you get on the plane. And unless someone says something and more important, does something, then that stands. We're at this weird, we're like, actually, but I was about to say swamp, drain the swamp. I'll use swamp. We're sort of at this weird swampy moment where we're like on really unstable ground, sort of being sucked under, and none of us knows where to get good footing. And the ground is shifting all the time. It's like a swamp in an earthquake. And so we're, that's kind of where we are right now. And it's partly due to things like these economic measures, which seem haphazard, maybe haphazard. And the reasoning behind why they're being passed also is unknown, but if you think about it a little bit, it isn't good. So at any rate, yeah, Catherine says I grew up fearing quicksand. Yeah, what's scarier than quicksand, right? But a swampy, quicksand
That's
in
a
a
really good way of putting it. I mean, it's giving me language for what this
right.
time in my life is.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
Quick.
man.
At
So,
any rate, okay, more questions.
okay. All right, let me see here. So sorry, Amy does a better job of
No,
doing
go
it.
ahead. You're doing good.
I was trying to be present in the moment and then I wasn't
No,
like
I
prepared.
know. I've been thinking
Um,
all along how wonderfully good you are at doing
oh,
this.
you're so sweet. Thank
No,
you.
I am. I
Okay,
have. I'm not
well,
lying.
thank you. Well, okay, so
You're
Ellen
getting
says, what was it?
you're getting applause emojis.
Oh, thank you. Okay, wow, I feel very supported. Okay, so Ellen says, already many people I know are feeling the effects of cuts in funding. At my school district, they cut junior high school, summer school completely because of loss of federal funding. That's crazy. Sorry, that was me. Annie doesn't do that.
That was the op-ed part of this.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was op-ed. Quote, at what point do school districts just start blatantly refusing to provide services for mandates that are no longer funded? And is that what their end game is anyway?
Well, okay. So I'm glad for this question because everyone I've spoken with within the last 24 hours uh, has been affected, particularly given my profession, by the slashing of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I have friends who are writers who were given a grant to be able to write their book, and they just lost their funding. One of them had gotten half of her grant, and now she lost the other half. Um, Annie and I were communicating yesterday via text, and I think she said one of her relatives was getting a PhD in science, and now, poof, gone. She doesn't have funding for that. I suspect that there are many, many, many people here, among however many people are here, who could talk about someone, whether it's through the NEH or through something else, that suddenly something that they'd been counting on is gone. And, this gets us back to credit, right? Because if you're given a grant by the government, that's a promise, right? That is a promise of sorts. Think about the Fulbright scholars in foreign countries who were just stranded there when the Fulbright grants were canceled, right? When you're given a government grant, it's a promise. If you just say, oh, well, we don't want it anymore, that pretty much slashes at your credit, and your citizens, the people of that country, are not going to trust the government at all. And we're in that kind of a moment now too, where the government's constantly just saying, we don't care. Yeah, we sent an innocent person to an El Salvador prison, but we can't get them back because, rule of law. Like we as a government should be following the rule of law because that's one of the core essentials of democracy, keeps you from having a dictator who can do whatever he wants. But if you don't really believe in the rule of law, um, then you get a situation like this where, someone did not get due process, as did all the people sent there, right? They didn't get a chance to get fairly asked questions and to be proven in one way or another that they'd done something wrong or that they hadn't. And I suspect that if people knew more of the people who were there, they would find more people who are innocent and shouldn't be there. And their crime was not having the right colored skin or having a tattoo. So I don't know how I got into that. The start of the question was what, Claire?
It was about the funding that's being cut, and you mentioned like NEH and stuff like
Oh,
that.
and National History Day
I can't
defunding.
believe that I didn't know that until just now. I wonder if Jessica knows. I mean, she worked for them for a long time.
Right.
NEH funds one of our grants that I went on this year that was super impactful for me.
National History
Um,
Day is so popular with students that ironically, I've sometimes been, can it be less popular? Because I get
hmm,
892 emails from students that are like, my National History Day project is on this. Can I talk to you? And I can't
oh,
possibly talk to all the people, right? So it
yeah,
it it gets students interested in our history, it gets them interested in learning, and it teaches them things about our history, right? And clearly, we are not at a moment where the teaching of history, never mind, is being supported, but we're in a moment where the teaching of history is being attacked. Because heaven forbid we have a clear and truthful understanding of our past so that we can have a clear and truthful understanding of the present and our rights in it.
yeah,
But yeah, so the defunding of all of these things, or the slashing or the elimination of all of these things, like we haven't even begun to see the impact of that. I mean, a thing that I think of now and again, if the FDA is depopulated, if it just basically can't really do its job, what's going to ensure safe food and drugs in a way that we can trust? Someone on some social media platform was like, well, I don't think that the national government, how did he put it? Um, I don't think all of these defunding of agencies matters much to me, right? And that's so then I was like, to random individual, well, okay, you might think that, but do you want to be able to trust the food you eat or trust the medication you get or um trust anyway, I went on in that vein.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, the cutting of all of these things and cutting in a seemingly arbitrary chainsaw, that's their metaphor, manner that deliberately causes people to, on the one hand, feel even more immersed in the quicksand in a swamp, even more, trapped on the one hand, and scared, right? And in some way, getting the American people to feel afraid so that they'll grab at whatever is offered to them. That's part of the logic. I mean, just talking broadly, if you're talking about how authoritarians sometimes take power, they cause chaos and then step in and say, oh, I'll fix this. And then all these people climb on board, and then you have a dictator. So there's a logic to some of what's going on here. I'll stop there.
yeah. And for us, we're with the National Council for History Education. I mean, for me, even personally, this is like the slipperiest part of that swamp. Like, how do you even navigate?
No,
There's nothing to hold on to. And it's awful when the people who are completely adjacent to us in this space, NEH, I mean, we get our funding from NEH, National History Day, like those are the people that we look to for support, and they're the ones who are getting hurt. So yeah,
no, it's as Hamilton said, right? This is an entire thing. So it may seem like tariffs and cutting agencies. It's slashing at American credit in every single sense of the word. And that's going to have a huge, huge impact on all of us.
yeah. Um, yeah, so we can move on. So Marilyn says, will the April 5th rallies bring out the anger we feel over tariffs not approved by Congress?
I don't know. I mean, um, sometimes people are occasionally irritated that I'm like, I don't know. I think we live in a big age of I don't know. I think that gets us back to the quicksand in a swamp. Um, you know, I I don't know. It seems like this is going to be really big based on all that I'm seeing. It seems like a lot of people are um, making signs and getting ready to march all over the United States. Um, what will be the impact of that? I don't know. Ideally, one of the things that would do is show Americans that they're not alone and that there's a massive swell of opposition to what's going on right now. That would just be good for people to see and experience, even like just wherever you are, but on a national level, that will be important. Beyond that, I don't know what it will do. But I think it's important. I've talked about this in a variety of ways before too. Sometimes it's important to draw a line, whether or not that does something. Like I think I talked about this regarding congressional committee hearings, that you have a hearing and you talk about something that's seemingly improper and maybe nothing gets done, but you had the hearing, so you drew that line. And you said, regardless of what happens next, not acceptable, not right. So what we're doing here, in a sense, is on Saturday, is drawing a line, right? Who knows whether that line will matter in the end to the people right now who are in power? But we're saying that's it. You've gone across the line, and there's a heck of a lot of people who disagree with that. And we, the people, are the people with power. How many 892 million zillion times have I said that? But it's because I believe it and because it's true. The government is built on us. And Americans are so not used to thinking about having to support the government being under attack fundamentally, democracy, honest to goodness, being at risk. We've taken so much for granted for so long uh, and have assumed for so long that horrible things will not happen to us because we're the United States of America and we're different from other nations. And we live in a time where that's being proven not true over and over and over and over again. That's a really hard lesson to learn. And it's something that's like bred into you. I think if you're American, you learn at school, right? The United States is special. Everyone learns that about their country to a certain degree, but the United States has like its extra bonus points that I think it Americans generally feel that goes all the way back to the founding, right? We're a different kind of nation. Europe is corrupt, but we are better. We are new. We will do things. We're not a monarchy. We'll be more fair. We'll have, we could go on and on and on. Um, so it's very hard to overturn that. And I think that's part of why, as loudly as people like me and Heather Cox Richardson have been screaming for so long, it's been hard to get people to listen because that's just something that doesn't feel as though it should be true, but it is.
Do you feel like even you personally, but maybe the country as a whole, assuming we walk out of this, it's hard to stay unscathed because we're already scathed.
I know.
But like let's say in
Not
10 years or
enormously.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you think we'll have a greater appreciation, or do you think we'll go back to the city on a hill kind of a feeling? You know?
I don't think we're going to be able to go back to where we were before, whatever that means. I don't think it's we can maybe, pontificate about like, yeah, city on a hill, but I think recent events and ongoing events right now are making it so that whatever comes next, whenever that comes, um, you just can't go back to what was before. Now, that might be positive. I mean, I said this at the beginning of all of our chaos, that moments of chaos, um, you can think of them in two ways. Actually, I think I said this maybe in my first test case for this that I sent in to NCHE, like, what do you think if I do a webcast like this? Moments of chaos like this, you can interpret them in two ways. You can say, oh my gosh, we're going to hell in a handbasket. It's all going down. It's death, destruction. We're doomed. Or you can say, this is a moment of profound instability. We can take advantage of this moment to improve things, to make things better, to come together and do something positive. Instability, back to the quicksand in the swamp, but you can also come together and help each other get out of the quicksandy swamp and actually do something good. And it's easy to forget the second half of that equation, but I fundamentally believe in that. I fundamentally, and this is going to sound so hokey, but I fundamentally believe in the American people. I do. Even if we're like, city on a hill and we're better than everybody else and we don't accept the risks that we have faced in the past. I believe that in the same way people have been assuming city on a hill, I think that Americans don't necessarily intellectually, not all Americans, but some, don't necessarily intellectually understand what democracy means, but they're going to feel it pretty darn soon. And I believe in the spirit of the American people to stand up for much of what this country represents. Now, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that works, but I will never surrender my faith that there are enough of us to come together and do something good. I just have that faith. I don't know why. I just do. And I hope many of us do, because it's going to take a lot of us to come together and try and do good in the midst
Yeah.
of the quicksand.
Man, now I'm just here with Joanne Freeman, and I just want to ask you all these questions, but I have Claire questions and then I have audience questions. So maybe we do the audience questions. Um, yeah, okay, so we can go down the list here a little bit. So Kathleen says,
I want to
oh, go
say
ahead.
one thing before you go on the list, because someone said, oh, Carol Lee. She's grateful to be here in this room with so many informed people who care. And I just want to reiterate that because, folks, community is it. Right now, community is it, right? You need to know that there are people you can turn to. You need to know that there are people around you who agree with you. You need to have a sense of community right now, because otherwise you're going to feel isolated and powerless and paralyzed and alone, and you're not. So we all need to be thinking about the ways in which we have latent communities we haven't taken advantage of, whatever they may be. It's going to matter in a concrete way. If something happens that's problematic, you want to know that there's a community of people you can turn to talk about it, to wrestle with it, to figure out what to do. I mean, that's what we do here, right? We are a community of people that meets every week to wrestle with what's happening and have history guide us. That's going to be important on so many levels going forward. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carolee. We can go back to the
I
question.
think that's really important. And we could even say do a step further. Like if you have anything to offer to people as a member of your community in this space, like I know that I have these resources. If you're teaching history and you're struggling with the words for that, I found a way with my colleagues to talk about that. Or I'm looking for, a way to consume the news or whatever. I feel like this is a good space for people to ask those questions and offer those, I guess, gifts.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm not going to be able to find it. There are all kinds of lists floating around now about like things, concrete things you can do. I think on Blue Sky yesterday, I forwarded one, reposted one that's like 26 things you can do in this moment. And some of them are just like, what do you do well? How can doing that thing help? Like, it's not like, some of these things are pretty small. But if a lot of people do these things, folks, that can have a really, really, really huge impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a very gifted group anyways, so we can
This,
use that for each other.
I was gonna say this is.
So Jackie asks, what would Hamilton do in this moment?
Well, first he would write another letter like the one I just read. It torments me, right? He would come up with another highly dramatic statement. What would he do if he's out? Well, okay, one thing he might do is really not good. So Hamilton is a guy who believed in force and was not really fond of democracy, right? We don't get that guy in the musical, but he was very nervous about the power of the people, very nervous. He considered it, flighty, and people get swayed by demagogues and they do all kinds of stupid things. And we need a strong government because you can't give too much power to the people. And it's more complex than that, but he was wary about democracy. So in Hamilton, the course of Hamilton's life, when there was chaos of some kind, Hamilton's response was often call in the army, right? Bring in the military, like that will get people really to pay attention. There's like I think there were like fires in New York at some point, and people, it was a little chaotic, and he's like, "Oh, we need, bring the military in, bring the military in." Or when people are refusing to pay the excise tax on whiskey, the Whiskey Rebellion, and Hamilton's like, "March the army on the rebels!" And he said, you do that because if you let them do that, what they're doing, then the government has no power. But march the army, turning to military force, right off the cuff, like he says when the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, right? So there's the Alien and Sedition Acts during the Quasi-War under John Adams' presidency, that, tamped down in a lot of ways on foreigners in the country, the ability of the president to just ship them out. Alien Enemies Act, like we all are hearing that a lot these days, right? And the Sedition Act, that you cannot criticize the government. And Madison and Jefferson passed the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. And they basically, and they don't, one does and one doesn't use this word. They basically say when something is inherently unconstitutional, states have the right to nullify it, right? So this is a big deal. And Hamilton is once again in his like, tortures me to the, but he writes a letter. I've also taught it in the recent past in my seminar, that says something like, here's what we need to do. We need to write a pamphlet and get it into the hands of every single person in Virginia and Kentucky. And then we need to march an army down there. And this is a quote, put them to the test of resistance. Thanks, Hamilton. That's really, really probably not the best thing to do right now. So anyway, I don't think, oddly enough, sometimes during a crisis, that impulse is not necessarily a good impulse. Oh, here we go. I don't know what Jim is referencing, but that founders.archives.gov is where you can go and get all of the writings of Hamilton, Jefferson, Madison, Washington, the whole gang. Okay. Oh, there we go. And look at that. Look at that. Put Virginia to the test of resistance. Okay. May I just pat myself on the back for getting the
That's
precise.
really good. That's really good. I would be very proud of myself in that moment.
Hamilton, I'm good with Hamilton quotes. Yeah.
I
Hamilton
have an
did.
after party question about you and Hamilton and ghosts of like, I'm writing it down on my piece of paper.
Okay,
Okay,
you read it. That's an
I'll write it
after.
down while you enter the next
Oh,
one.
it's almost after party time, but let's maybe try and take one or two more questions.
I think this might be a good one to leave us off on, in
Okay.
terms of trying to find branches in a swamp. Um,
Okay.
like, so can you, it kind of says, can you put Senator Booker's marathon speech in context for us? Do you think it will change anything? And if so, how?
Okay, so I was actually on a variety of social media platforms arguing about this because there were a lot of cynics that were like, big freaking deal. Like he's talking a lot. It's not going to do anything. They're not doing anything. Who cares? Blah, 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 blah. It's not going to persuade anyone. The people who are doing what they're doing now, they're not going to listen to him and say, like, yeah. But my point was, and the reason why I think it's important is he's doing precisely what a million people marching on Saturday will do, which is showing that there are people who disagree with what's going on in an extreme way and performing it. A lot of people said, well, it's performative. It's like, well, yeah, it is. Because part of what he was doing was trying to get people to pay attention and say, this is not right. This is not fair. I'm not going to stand behind a podium for 15 minutes in a press conference and say that because no one will hear it. But if I have the longest speech in history in the Senate, people are going to pay attention to the fact that I'm doing it, and whether or not they remember my words. Some of his words are memorable, but whether or not they remember my words, it's a way of showing the public that there's resistance and that there's a way to come together to resist. So as a gesture, as a way to encourage people to stand up, I think it matters. I think it does. And I do have to say, Strom Thurmond, who was not a big fan of civil rights, and the fact that a Black man overturned Strom Thurmond's record is kind of beautiful, historic justice. At any rate, a message just darted on my screen, and once again, that's hard. I have to figure out how to make that not happen. At any rate, I guess that's where I can go with that. I think it had meaning, and I don't think it was like just a performance and who cares. And part of why I think that we're still talking about it.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of people watching live. I was like keeping track on just the numbers, like
There were,
56,000 on one of the live streams. That's a lot of
there were,
people. I
there
mean,
were
I
a
don't know what
lot
numbers
of
are
people.
usually like.
There were a lot of people watching. And part of what they were listening and they were watching someone perform that for the good of the country. And then some people are like, no, he just wants re-election. It's like, really, there are other ways.
Yeah, things
At
are a
any
little
rate,
bit easier.
I do. I think it matters as a way of pledging and demonstrating patriotism and an understanding of what the sort of true core of this country and the ways in which that's being violated right now. So, okay. It's going to go to the after party. Let me explain to people who are new here what that means. So, man, you guys have like great comments in the comments and chat, and I'm trying not to look. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to go to the after party, and what that means is we will no longer be recording what we're saying, so we can be even freer and easier with what we're saying than we have been all along. If you beamed in through the NCHE website, just stay right where you are, and thank you, Dave. Poof, you will be in the after party. If you are watching us on Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too will be in the after party. In the meantime, I want to, particularly given the topic of today's comments, I want to thank you for being here because we, being we the people, that's where it is. That's where we are. That's what we have to remember. That's what we have to build up. That's what we have to understand the power of. That's what we have to believe and act upon. So us here modeling this, doing this week after week after week, guys, like I say all the time, anyone can do this, right? Anyone can do this. You can come together, you can get 10 people who meet every week and discuss things. And yes, maybe even, as Tim says, make good trouble. At any rate, what we're doing here matters because it is the essence of democracy. Our right to question things, our right to meet with each other, and our right to figure out ways to improve things for the better. Okay. Oh, yes, Jim says save the liver. So anyway, we're about to go to the after party, even though I don't have to save the liver yet, which means save the chat. I just did. Okay. Let's go to the after party.